Imagine you get a $50 weekly allowance, but you spend $70. To cover the difference, you borrow $20. Imagine doing that exact same thing for decades. By April 2026, the U.S. government will owe nearly $39 trillion. The government gets to this massive number in a surprisingly simple way. Every year, it spends more money than it brings in through taxes, and then it stacks each of those yearly debts right on top of the last one. So how exactly did America build this towering mountain of debt? And what actually happens when the country's credit card gets declined? Over the last 30 years, almost every president, from both political parties, has swiped the national credit card and added to the bill. We start with a rare historical exception. During the Clinton years, the government actually brought in more money than it spent, creating a surplus. Then, during the Bush era, tax cuts, expensive overseas wars, and the 2008 financial crash added $4.2 trillion to the debt. To rescue the economy from that massive crash, the government borrowed heavily during the Obama years, adding another $7.7 trillion. In the first Trump term, new tax cuts combined with the massive emergency of the COVID-19 pandemic added $6.7 trillion. During the Biden years, spending to recover from the pandemic, plus the rising cost of borrowing money itself, added an additional $7 trillion. And by early 2026, during the second Trump term, the total debt pushed up to that nearly $39 trillion mark. This chart shows the cumulative buildup. When you pile crisis responses and tax cuts on top of each other term after term, the debt grows rapidly, no matter who is sitting in the Oval Office. You might hear people say the government is just throwing all this money away on silly, unimportant things. But this data visualization compares exactly where the money goes. It shows the vast majority pays for massive, essential programs: Social Security for retirees, Medicare for older Americans, and the military. Everything else is a much smaller fraction. Because the government borrows so heavily to pay for these big items, it has to pay lenders an extra fee for holding their money. That fee is called interest. As the debt grows, the interest fee grows with it. Soon, the cost of paying that interest will overtake the entire U.S. military budget. If the bill is getting this large, why don't politicians just stop spending the money? The answer lies in a psychological trap called fiscal illusion. Voters demand expensive things like excellent schools, secure borders, and reliable healthcare, but they naturally refuse to pay the higher taxes needed to fund them. Politicians want to win elections, which means giving the voters exactly what they want today. So they use a political magic trick. They borrow the money to pay for today's promises and leave the massive bill for kids and future generations to figure out. There is a strict legal limit on exactly how much the government is allowed to borrow, known as the debt ceiling. If the government hits that ceiling and the money officially runs out, it triggers an event called a default. In a technical default, the government would try to pay the big international banks first to prevent a total economic crash. But to pull that off, it would have to freeze domestic lifelines, abruptly stopping Social Security checks and military pay for everyday Americans. The alternative is a full default. In this scenario, the United States simply fails to pay back its international lenders entirely. Because U.S. debt is considered the safest money on earth, failing to pay those bonds would instantly ignite a global financial panic. Credit markets would freeze, the U.S. dollar would rapidly lose its value, and the cost of everyday items like groceries and housing would skyrocket. The numbers are now too large for quick fixes or political magic tricks. To stop the runaway train, America will eventually have to make painful choices. The country will have to significantly raise taxes or deeply cut the major benefits that millions of people rely on. The $39 trillion question is, will our leaders be brave enough to cut the national credit card before a catastrophic default forces their hand?